This happened 2 years ago. It's hard to talk about, both because people don't believe me when I do, and also because this experience has screwed me up for the rest of my life. I was in a car accident back in 2019, before COVID. I was told by my family that I was unconscious for 2 days in the hospital, but that's not how I remember it. One moment, I was driving through the hills on the state highway. The next, I found myself standing in a dark hall with no windows. The walls were made of black marble, the floors constructed of slick black tiles, the ceiling drowned in shadow. In one direction, there was a closed door with light creeping through from the edges. Turning around to see the other direction, I just saw it fade completely into the darkness, as I couldn't see where it went, or when it ended. Through the door, I found a room. It was full of, well, I don't know what to call those people, because how you could tell that they once had lives. It was clear they weren't alive anymore. The figurines were all dressed from all different backgrounds. Their skin was gray, and they stood in these displays in different poses, as though this was a twisted museum that liked to taxidermy humans. I saw an Englishman from the 1800s, a Chinese peasant from the 3rd century, a little girl from Kansas from 1970. I couldn't stand to be in the room. It bothered me so much. So I rushed to the next room. This one was full of machines that acted as though they were living entities. They were loud, buzzing chaotically and violently. They were made from what looked like a large thick pair of smooth steel metal rings, twisting and turning, orbiting into each other. They moved around the room rapidly. I don't know if they noticed me, but still, I was scared. They were 3 times my size, and I thought that if they ran into me, that they'd kill me. So again, I rushed to the next room, dodging the machine as it happened to race through my path. The next room blew my mind. There's no way I can describe it that will truly and justifiably convey its unnerving beauty. I stepped through to the next room and immediately I was cold. My heart jumped and I panicked when I saw that there was no floor, or at least, that's what it appeared to be. Instead, there were stars everywhere. It was like I was entering outer space itself directly. I extended a foot and found that even though my eyes couldn't detect it, there was in fact a floor. Cautious, my legs shaking, I took a step forward, then another, then slowly, I was again making my way to the other side of the room. I stopped when I saw an orb about the size of a volleyball and larger than any of the stars suspended in the room. It was the moon. It was so surreal. I couldn't believe it at first. Looking to my right, I then could see Earth, still smaller than what I have known, but filled the space much more significantly. There was no way it was the real one, or so I liked to convince myself. But if it were a replica, it was a damn good one, better than one a professional could ever make. I could see the space debris and satellites polluting our atmosphere. I could see the ISS and the contents that fell in shadow. I witnessed ignite into webs of light representing the cities. Mesmerized, I spent a longer time in that room. I didn't rush to leave. Still though, I was curious as to what this place was. I was confused why I was here. I started getting scared again, this time more existentially. How would I get home? There was only one way to go. and it was the way I hadn't gone yet. So through the door I went. In the final room, all there was a beautiful glass window, the kind you might see at a church, expansive and ornate, and towering over you. Light blazed from it, as though sunlight was anxious to get through from the other side but couldn't, with the exception of the center, which was a large, thick, simple cross. There were flowers at the base of the window, as though it were an offering. I stepped forward, and the window opened to reveal itself as a door. On the other side, I could see blackness. I stepped through, having concluded I must be in the afterlife, and this must be my destiny. But instead of heaven or St. Peter, through the window, I once again found myself in an expanse of darkness. This one without any floors, ceilings, or walls to define it. The only thing I could see was a gigantic set of sharp teeth, the size of a city skyline, and fuzzy lips that looked like they were supposed to belong to an animal. Shivering, I felt my knees go weak, and I almost collapsed to the ground. The entity's mouth greeted me. It introduced itself as God. It took me a long time to gather my bearings and courage. The creature that claimed to be God knew who I was. He confirmed my date of birth and my parents' names and the deepest fears I had never shared with anyone, or the memories from my childhood I had almost forgotten about. I asked God questions. I asked what the figurines were, and what the machines in the other rooms were. I asked if that was really Earth that I had seen. I asked him if I'd ever find love, if I'd ever have kids, if I'd ever be happy, and when I would die, if I wasn't already dead. I asked him if humans were the only intelligent life in the universe, and what our purpose was as a species, and if we were doing a good job. He grinned at that one, almost in a twisted way. I began to notice. It depends on who you are, God answered, still smiling that nefarious smile. Some of you are for my collection. Some of you are my entertainment. Some of you are my experiments. Some of you are snacks. He chuckled. I began to feel dread a lot more in my stomach. God, if he was who he said he was, I realized, wasn't on our side. I had to stop myself from devolving into a panic attack. Swallowing all of that, I asked to go home. Sure, he said. It'll be fun to see one of you live your life knowing what awaits you. What really awaits you. You were supposed to join me today, but I can arrange it so you go back. Enjoy your life. After you return, think of how you'd prefer to spend your afterlife. The entity that claimed to be God chuckled. It's cute, so many of you think that paradise awaits you, or that I care what you all do down there. Before I could speak or argue, or do anything, I suddenly found myself in a hospital bed, waking up to my parents looking over me. My mom was crying, overwhelmed that I was finally recovering and rising from my unconsciousness. My dad was crying too, the first time I ever saw him do so. At first, I was relieved. It had been a dream. None of it was real. I'd die and go to heaven, like I was always taught. Or I'll die, and it will be a void, non-existence. It was when I watched the sunset that next day, with my girlfriend who came to visit me, once she knew I had awoken, that the existential fear and dread came back. I asked her if she could see it. She was confused when I did, and asked me, "What, you mean the sun?" That's when I knew. Only I could see it, and no one else. Where the sun should have been, was instead a window. The same window. The one blazing light. Now red, orange, and yellow, like sorbet, to project the sunlight. I could see the cross. I began to break down and cry. My girlfriend tried to comfort me. To this day, I still see it. To this day, if I ask anyone else if they can, I just get confused responses as though I'm absurd. I know now that the curse of knowledge is for me and me alone. Everyone else is going to find out when they die. In the old school way, I guess. He was telling the truth. The entity I had encountered was indeed God. And now I know for sure. God is always watching.